Hi, I'm Evelyn. I'm an addict. So, the reason why I'm speaking today is on behalf of Narcotics Anonymous, on part of my story in NA. The reason why I came here is because there's nowhere else I've ever been where everyone's trying to stay clean. So it's a place where a lot of people get together, and the one common goal that we're trying to do is stay clean. And the other thing that we're trying to do is figure out how we get through this life clean. That's been the hardest thing for me is I put down using for the last time when I was 39, and I've been clean now for 3.5 years, but that first 18 months was like the hardest in my entire life. But I'm glad I did it, and it's one of these things where you have to like love yourself enough to try and continue to work this program and stay clean and give yourself the gift of recovery. Because there's this brain up here that tells us we don't need it, we don't want it, we don't belong here, we just cross the line a little bit and we can go back, and all these little mental gymnastics that we play in order to, wants to talk us into going back out. And it doesn't matter like what it is, you know, it's so weird. I hear people that are heroin addicts and then they're like, oh, but I've never had a problem with weed, so now I'm gonna smoke pot. It's like, no, this is a program of complete abstinence. That means no weed, no mind-altering substances. And you know, a lot of people say, oh, alcohol is not a big deal, it's a drug. And NA has defined it as a drug. And I've been around a lot of people growing up on different kind of drugs, and like the one that to me is the most disgusting of all is alcohol. So that's looking from a little kid's point of view. So the way I grew up was my mom was an alcoholic, and let's just say she wasn't a very good, she wasn't paying attention. She had 3 kids, and she was the kind of mother that would pick us up from school and say, I'm just going to go to the bar and have a couple drinks, and she thinks she could be back in 20 minutes, and she wouldn't come out for hours. Oftentimes she would get us there at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, leave 3 kids in the back of this Vega with maybe a pillow, a blanket, and a box of Cheerios, and we wouldn't see her for 12 or 13 hours. Maybe she would have some drunk dude run out and give us some nuts or something, but then, you know, lo and behold, by 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, she's in the front seat giving some dude a blowjob. And that is the kind of woman that she was when she was drinking. And now that I'm in recovery, like I can honestly say that I feel like she honestly thought she was just going to go in there and have a drink. Or do whatever she was going to do. But once the alcohol touched her lips, like she had no control over what happened next. I can't say I don't still have resentments against her and some negative feelings, but it's kind of hard because I became that woman after a number of years. So what happened for me is she went to jail for the drunk driving, and when I was about 8 or 9, and in there she met a man who was a man of her dreams, and so when he went to prison, they got married in jail or something like that. I just know he paroled to our house, and he was a heroin addict, so entered the world of, you know, a lot of needles, a lot of crank, a lot of people shooting up left and right in front of me. Everywhere I was like, you know, becoming of age as a young lady, so 12, 13, 14 years old, and I got all these fucking tweakers trying to get at me, and like I had to learn how to trust my instincts and survive and not take rides from school. They got, I'm gonna say low. I haven't really been to jail much. I know you guys are all in jail. Actually, I've never been to jail except for one time in a holding tank. But I visited my mom and dad in jail over a 3-year period of time constantly. One phone in this ear, one phone in this ear, and they would let them both come in so that we could talk to them. Or my brother and my sister and my mom with, you know, both phones in the ear. And like I had, during those years, I had to like dodge CPS and stuff. I dropped out of school in 7th grade because like I was so afraid of going to a foster home. And when they got out that one particular time I was 14, we lived in a tent. And it was about that time that I met a bunch of other like street kids, you know what I mean? Like kids that were, their parents were addicts too, and they didn't give a shit what we were doing. And I ran around the streets till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning at 14, 15 years old. We lived in a tent and mom's all strung out, no one really cares. So I remember like between the ages of 14 and 17, I stood in line for every single meal I ate at Salvation Army. And I remember when I was standing in line with all the other, the soup kitchen, with everyone else who comes off the street, like, I didn't feel depression, but what I felt was a very deep level of despair. And we lived underneath the bridge at one point. My mom was turning tricks to the side of me, and like, it was 3 o'clock in the morning and I could hear her. It was disgusting. So I chose to go down the little riverbed and try to huddle underneath this tree. And it was like probably about 4:30 in the morning, so the sun was starting to come up, and like the mist was falling still on the river. And I had this little tiny, like a jacket like this. This is not my jacket. I had to wear this because I had a tank top on. and like, I was so cold. I was so cold. I was so hungry. I was so angry at my mother for putting me in this position. I was disgusted with the life that I had to live at that moment because I was born into it, right? And I believe there's a life we make and there's a life we're born into. And just because I'm born into a life does not mean that that's the life I'm going to live. And I made myself a promise that night that I'll never forget. And it was probably the deepest prayer I've ever said in my life. And I said, my child will never know how this feels. And so it wasn't shortly after that I pretty much disengaged with my mom, and I got a job when I was 16 as a waitress, and got a nice little, I got warm clothes for one, I got food for another, and then I kept the roof over my head one way or another. And when I was 19 years old, I had fallen in love a few years earlier with this guy who was my dad's friend, my stepdad's friend. He was much older than me. He was about 8 years older, and he got out of prison. It was like the whole cycle, you know what I mean? Anyways, so I had a little baby with this guy, and I remember like holding this little baby and remembering that prayer that I said to myself, and remember that I was going to give her the best life I possibly could. And I was very much in love with her father. His name was Walter, and he died of this disease at 46 years old. And I will say a little bit about his life because, it was that cycle. Like he would go to jail and he would get buffed out in prison, and he'd come out looking all good, and then he'd get, on drugs and get strung out and get all sucked up, and then pretty soon when he was, had no hustle going on, then he'd catch another case or a violation and go back in and then get buffed out, and did that cycle over and over and over again. And what happened for him is when he was about early 40s, he lost his looks, and with that he lost his hustle, and he never ever learned any other way to live, no other tools, and he died. He died shooting heroin. And when I got here when I was 40, and I came across all these amazing people in NA who got their lives together and living this it's like people come in here with no job skills, nothing going on. Within 5 years are living these amazing lives. It's just wow. And I got really upset inside because I'm like, Walter had to have known about NA. He had been in jail so much, he had to have gone to a meeting somewhere and heard the message of recovery at some point. And for whatever reason, he never went to a meeting that I know of when he was out, and he let himself die. And it makes me pissed off because I love this guy, and I feel like he chose dope over me and our little baby. But anyways, it was clear that if I stayed with this guy, I was going to have the same kind of life I had growing up. It didn't take it's rocket science to figure that out. So shortly thereafter, I got strung out and dope for a while with him. And I quit pretty quickly. And my baby was like 6 months old, and I was like, this is not going on the right path. So I got a job, and luckily for me, it was a job I was really good at, and I kept that job for 20 years. And I gave her an amazing life. She had a canopy bed, she had princess freaking clothes, she had like designer clothes, she had a really nice home. She had jazz, she had ballet, she had like all this really cool stuff. And, I thought I did a pretty good job. And I remember when she was 4 years old, I remember thinking like, I'm not gonna have any more children, because when she's 4, or when she's 20, I'm gonna be 39 and I'm gonna party. Like, I had pretty much put my life on hold for those 20 years. All I did was work and go home and raise her up, right? And at 39, it's on. And so she left. She ended up leaving the house when she was a little bit younger, and I remember, like, by the time she left, I was so spiritually bankrupt. Like, I had nothing going on. I just lived on the outside. I lived for all these superficial things, a house, a car. Look at me, I built all this stuff out of my little homeless, self, and I had, all these fancy clothes, and like, I felt nothing inside. And I remember leaving this house where I was married to this man who was a horrible person. I'll get into that in a minute, but I left that house and with all my hoochie mama clothes in a backpack, and I freaking put it on my back, and I went to the bar, and I stayed there for 18 months, and at the end of 18 months I was completely and utterly morally bankrupt. I had compromised myself as a woman for the first time in my life, and the sad part about it is that there's a part of me inside that loved it. I was living in a way that I had never lived before, and a part of me really liked it. What happened was I met a friend through Facebook that I had been on the streets with when I was a teenager, and he came in my life 18 months later, and like, I feel like he saved my life. But what happened was we saw each other for the first time in 18 years, and I met him that night, and I fell head over heels in love. I was not too happy about that, but it was like a very clear message that this was a beautiful opportunity for me to have the same kind of feelings that I had once before when I loved Walter, because I had not ever had those feelings for another man. So when I familiarized with those feelings, I was like, I know what this is, and this is real. This is not something to turn my back on. The only problem was he was clean. He had worked the 12 steps, and my disease was pissed off, right? So here's this guy in front of me. First time I ever met anyone who's worked the 12 steps before. I didn't even know what the 12 steps were, and like, I felt weird, and I can remember why I felt that way, and I was struggling, like, what in the hell is going on? And I remember thinking, like, I don't feel good enough. For the first time in my life, I did not feel good enough. And believe me, ego and arrogance and confidence had driven me a long time. And here's a man with 12 steps with no pennies to rub together. He got a ratty ass truck with freaking grease all over the place, which might get all greasy, right? He's got this crazy ass beard and this crazy ass hair, and like, the look in his eyes, I will never forget. It was solid, it was strong, and I was incredibly attracted to it. And after a few months, like, he figured, and I had like a house and all this stuff, and he figured out, that I was out of control. At the end of my disease, alcohol was my drug of choice, and the reason why I liked that drug is because it allowed me to be a type of woman that part of me really, really wanted to be. So he said, Evelyn, this isn't going to work for me. I can't have a woman running around the bars and stuff. Like, I'm clean, this is my lifestyle. And so I couldn't handle that, you know what I mean? And what's weird is when you work the steps, you find out all kinds of stuff. So when I did my 4th step, I realized like I have a huge problem with rejection. And when I went through my resentment list, especially under the age of 15, all my uncles and my aunts and my grandparents, I looked through all these people I resented, and on the right-hand column of that, I had the word rejection. That these people had rejected me in some way. So I had a deep fear of rejection. I also didn't like to give rejection, which is why I ended up married to 3 people, even though 2 of them I really didn't want to marry because I didn't want to say no. And so I couldn't handle the rejection, so I decided to stop. And I tried to stop, and 2 weeks later it was very clear to me that I couldn't do this on my own. And I started coming to meetings, and on my 3rd meeting, I saw something that I had never seen before in my life put together, and those are the words moral inventory. And when I looked at those words, all I remember is that whole meeting, I just stared at those words, and they were written on the wall, the 12 steps, moral inventory, and I just that night, something inside me broke. And what I saw was my life for reals for the first time. Yeah, I raised my daughter. I had been married 3 times to 2 men I didn't even want to marry. And I didn't have the guts to say no, because that's, you know what I mean? Like who, that's not a kind of, like that's an attribute of a human being that people are supposed to have. But instead I just used these people for what I wanted because they were serving something for me at the time, which was attention and love. And they were giving that to me, and then I'll just toss them to the side when I'm done and on to the next. Treated people like garbage. I let my daughter be verbally abused by 2 of those men, call her horrible names. I never once in my life stood up for her to say, I don't like the way you're talking to my daughter. I have to live with that, you know what I mean? I was stoned every single day from the time I was 11 years old all the way till I was 39. Every single day. So that 20 years, I smoked weed morning, noon, and night. And that's totally medicated. I had this thing to raise my daughter, and that was my goal. Am I running out of time? You know what I mean? I had to get honest about the kind of person I really was. And it's weird because I realized no one ever taught me how to be a grown-up. You know what I mean? I picked up a bunch of survival skills from the gutter, you know what I mean? And used those to try to get through life as an adult woman. And yeah, they worked for me for a while and they probably kept me safe. But I'm not gonna be able to use that same toolbox to get through marriages and a relationship. And I'm still with my guy. It's been 3.5 years, and it's the most beautiful experience I ever had, and the most difficult. I had to pick up new tools. So he told me in NA, and I've learned this to be true, you know what I mean, we have our toolbox, we filled up from the time we're little kids with all kinds of tools, and for women, a lot of times it's manipulation and all kinds of other stuff. And I got to put that toolbox down. And now I got a new empty toolbox, and I get to fill it up with all this amazing stuff. And the amazing stuff is not easy. The amazing stuff in being clean is freaking hard, but I'm fighting for it because I want a better life. I don't want to keep living that same life in a circle. And I got this crazy bitch that lives inside my head that tells me I should go out and party, and I know that that's not okay. Why would I want to go out to why would I want to go be that woman again? You know, and I know that person lives inside of me, and that's okay. She's probably going to be there forever. The trick is, even though I want to use, I don't have to use, and that's the beauty of this program. It promises us freedom from active addiction, and our addiction isn't always manifested in drugs, right? So even though I put my life on hold for that period of time, I was a messed up person. So with the 12 steps, the first step is only about abstinence. That's the only step that deals with drugs. 2 through 12 are how to live. So it's really I learned I don't have a using problem, I have a living problem, and that's why I use. And I went through some of the stuff in my inventory, my moral inventory of my sponsor, And I was like, oh, I did all these things because look at how messy it got at the end of my disease. Like, look at all my sexual inventory is all messed up at the end. And she said, Evelyn, you didn't do those things because you were loaded. You did those things because that's who you are. And being loaded made it easier. And that's true. That's true. So I get to work on whatever it is that makes me feel like I need to be that person. It's deep stuff, right? Let's see here, what else? I could talk a little bit about my daughter today. She's 24 years old. When I first got clean, I was pissed off. I didn't want to be here, but I felt like all the signs were there, and I will share with you why I decided to quit. Like I said, my boyfriend was questioning my behavior. My other friend came in from the other fellowship, and she was questioning my behavior. And then on December 23rd, 2012, my mom came for her visit. So my mom's been using meth for 45 years, and to see what that stuff can do to a woman after that period of time is really, really disgusting. So she's 64 years old, and she looks like she's 90. She has this long gray hair. She has all these scars all over her face because when she was loaded, we lived in a house with scabies, so she would pick, and like, it was disgusting. She'd take all her scabs and she'd put them in this little thingy so she could save them all. Then I'd get all tripped out on acid and look for roaches and come across this crazy stuff. It was a bad experience. But anyway, so she comes around the holidays, and I dread seeing her. I dread seeing her to this day because it's hard to see a once vivacious, beautiful woman become what she's become, and to see what drugs can do to a human being. But she's alive, and she's not clean. So she comes around on the holidays, and I open my home to her. I can barely stand to look at her, but I do, because I know that she needs my love, and I don't want to have all this guilt when she dies, that I treated her horribly. So